Hi, everyone, and welcome back to People Jew Wanna Know podcast. It's your host, Margarita, and today I am excited to introduce you to this week's guest, Daniella Rabbani. Coming out of the October 7th memorial episodes I did last week, I wanted to bring something uplifting and unusual to your ears, and Daniella makes for the perfect guest. Daniella Rabbani has been hailed as sympathetic and utterly alive by the New York Observer, hilarious by the Wall Street Journal, and will leave you twirling in the streets by the New York Times. She's an actress, singer, filmmaker, podcaster, mom. This woman is everything. Daniella has starred in Amazon's The Better Sister, HBO's Scenes from a Marriage, CBS's God Friended Me, FX's The Americans, and Fox's Laughs. She's also been in Ocean's 8, Appropriate Behavior, and her award-winning directorial debut, Oma. Oma is available on Amazon Prime Video. She hosts the Mom Curious podcast produced by Hoff Studios and has a BFA from NYU. You can check out her Instagram at Daniella Rabbani and her website, daniellarabbani.com. Now, I mentioned that Daniella is a singer, and what specifically makes Daniella unique is she is incredibly educated and well-versed in Yiddish music. Daniella is a Yiddish singer, and when I met her last year, this is how she imprinted herself in my mind, as the woman who knows Yiddish music. My grandparents always sang Yiddish music at home, and I actually grew up listening to Chor Turetzkava, which is a very famous men's choir in Russian that sang a lot of Yiddish songs all over the world. They actually normalized Yiddish and Jewish music in former Soviet Union countries, and this is a huge power move considering all the anti-Semitism that Jews experienced in the Soviet Union. This men's choir collabed with almost all major Russian and former Soviet Union artists in the early 2000s. They are definitely iconic. I did do some Spotify stalking to see if they're still around or what they're up to, and it appears that they have been turned into pro-Russian propaganda, as most Russian pop singers have, because one of their latest singles is titled My Russia. We wish them all the best, and we will not be listening. Anyway, back to Daniella. Speaking with Daniella on the topics of Yiddish music and even the Russian-speaking audience is a real treat because it brings about a lot of nostalgia for me. In this episode, you'll hear about Daniella's life and work. Of course, you'll hear some Yiddish singing from her, and she will tell us the fascinating story of Yiddish theater and how it impacted Broadway, Off Broadway, and ultimately Hollywood. Now, I live for theater, music, the arts. It's how I grew up, and it's very much the value that my family instilled in me. If you're in New York City and want to check out a show together, especially, hopefully, one of Daniella's upcoming shows, always feel free to reach out to me on Instagram at PeopleJewWannaKnow. For now, please enjoy this episode. Hey, Daniella, welcome to People Jew Wanna Know podcast. How are you today?
I am feeling a little tender today. It's October 8th. The day after the 1-year anniversary of the October 7th massacres. You will find out that I'm a really honest person. I wouldn't be able to be like, I'm great. Thanks so much for having me. So that's how I'm feeling today. But I'm also very grateful to be here. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for coming on. I empathize very deeply, as yesterday on October 7th, I just sat there and cried all day. It was a very sad day for me, and coming out of that today, it still feels like we're not quite past there. And I'm excited to pick your brain as someone who works in Jewish life and the Jewish world and the Jewish art scene on what it's been like this last year. So without further ado, tell us about yourself. What do you do and how did you get there?
I just want to say that I just in hearing you talk about processing our grief, I'm reminded how lucky we are that we are safe enough to do so. Yesterday in Israel, they were running from the bomb shelter to try and go grocery shopping, trying to do homework with their kids, etc. So I feel very grateful to have the space and relative safety to process. So my name is Daniella Rabbani. I am an actor, award-winning filmmaker, Yiddish songstress, and host of the Mom Curious podcast. I started my career off Broadway in a show called Gimple Tom, which was an adaptation of the I.B. Singer short story of the same name. Truly gorgeous play with music. I continued to work with that theater, it's the National Yiddish Theater, on several other off-Broadway productions, including The Golden Land, which was nominated for a Drama Desk, and Amid Falling Walls, which just won the Drama Desk. I have traveled the world singing in Yiddish with my mentor, Zalman Mlotek, and the National Yiddish Theater. We were just in Romania at the State Jewish Theater there. I've been to Vienna and the State Jewish Theater in Warsaw, Poland. And I also have the privilege of getting to do TV and film. Probably the clip that I'm most recognized from is the first episode, or the first scene rather, of Ocean's 8 opposite Sandra Bullock.
Wait, what? I've seen that movie. I need to rewatch this.
Oh, yeah. I was actually 8 months pregnant in that. And
wow.
I was 8 weeks pregnant, and they kept pushing the date back until I was very much showing. And the casting director and the writer, who I didn't know at the time, both women, were like, so what if she's pregnant? She's a shop girl. And so they put me behind a counter. They also gave me a box to stand on. I'm actually very petite. And Sandy is really beautiful and tall. You couldn't see my belly, but we shot in Bergdorf overnight, and it was really fun. Those two women have become very good friends of mine, and we raise our babies together. I had my son about a few months after that, and then all three of us became pregnant at the same time about 6 years ago now, and have kids around the same age. I'm actually in The Better Sister on Amazon, coming out this year, thanks to the writer of Ocean's 8, who's also the showrunner of The Better Sister. I've also been on God Friended Me. I played Rabbi Zoe Schwartz, which was a really fun role. Like I said, I host the Mom Curious podcast. I'm sure I'm missing a couple of highlights, but I feel like I've said enough about me. I'm done now.
So actually, God Friended Me was filmed outside of my first apartment in New York City on the Upper West Side, 101st and Central Park West.
Yeah, I was there. I was the first scene of the first episode right there.
So you were like pretending to live in my building or something? I was like, what are they doing over there? What is there to film on this block?
Well, Brandon, the number one on the call sheet, the lead, he pretended to live in your building, and he had a podcast then. This was in 2018. So it was pretty renegade of him to have a podcast. How meta to talk about it on a podcast. And I was his guest on the podcast and the first scene of that pilot.
What a coincidence. So we could have met all the way back in 2018, but totally. Only in 2023 did we meet at the Tablet Magazine Passover pop-up in New York City.
Yeah, shout out to Tablet. They're doing such great work.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to go back to something you talked about earlier, which is Yiddish. Talk to me about this passion for Yiddish. How did you get into this? Especially you came from a Sephardic, like modern Orthodox family, if I'm not mistaken. So can you tell me about the connection to the music and the language and how you made that a part of your career?
Thank you so much for asking. I went to NYU for acting school. I actually went to yeshiva growing up. So until I was 17, I was in yeshiva. And then I went off into the big wide world and studied acting at the Stella Adler Studio, which is a part of the NYU Tisch acting program. And I studied classical theater there, really fell in love with Shakespeare and Chekhov and Ibsen, and still have a real passion for the classics, which has helped me a lot doing classic plays in Yiddish. But I was raised speaking Hebrew at home. In Yiddish, we call Hebrew Lashon Kodesh, or Lashon HaKodesh, which is the holy language. And so Yiddish is written in Hebrew characters from right to left, and it's a Germanic language, similar to English. So with that linguistic background underfoot, it was a very easy language for me to pick up. Plus, being raised bilingual means that it's a little bit easier for those of us who speak other languages to pick up a third. It's important to note that when I was at the Stella Adler Studio, Stella's grandson, Tom Oppenheim, directed me in A Midsummer Night's Dream. And I had this bit. I played Hermia, which was the love interest, but I'm a funny lady, and I was funny then. And humor is important. So I did this comedic sort of physical comedy bit where when Lysander falls out of love with me, I just like crawl on my knees, and it's this like hysterical moment. And after we were done with rehearsal one day, Tom took me aside and he said, "You act like my family. I was hoping you would carry on the legacy of the Yiddish theater." I was graduating after that, and we did a rendition of Shalom Asch's play, God of Vengeance. If anyone has ever seen Indecent on Broadway, this is the origin text. Really gorgeous play. And it was a translation, so I didn't speak any Yiddish. But he ended up getting me a scholarship with the National Yiddish Theater and the Workers' Circle to sit and study Yiddish in order to carry on the legacy of the Yiddish theater, which was very important to him because Stella Adler, who was Marlon Brando's acting teacher, who really was one of the mothers of modern acting, was raised on the Yiddish stage with her father, Jacob P. Adler, who was a giant of the Yiddish theater. Tom had carried on her legacy as a teacher and as a mentor, but this particular part of his family legacy, he was sort of handing to me. Of course, I was honored and still am. And when I started learning the Yiddish language, it really felt like I was being reminded, like I had known it my whole life. And I often get that feedback from people when they hear me perform. It just feels like they are transported to another time. It's a really spiritual experience for me and always has been. This sort of relationship with my ancestors and the way they spoke, and having a relationship with the way they thought, with their poetry. And yeah, I find a lot of strength and clarity and pride in knowing this part of my people's history and being a part of that history. I just kept doing it because I enjoyed it, actually. It's also just good music.
Wow. I feel like it just kind of fell into your lap a little bit almost, this opportunity to carry the torch of the Yiddish culture and Yiddish music. And you have a big repertoire that you perform in Yiddish, right? The only Yiddish song that I know is Tumbalalaika, because all the Russian-speaking Jews know that song, obviously.
Actually, Margarita, the Russian Jews are the best audience. No shade to all y'all, but the Russian Jews will come to the theater with gifts for the performers. Flowers, chocolate.
Classic.
Teddy bears. Hugs. It is a joy to sing to Russian Yiddish speakers. Actually, at the National Yiddish Theater, they provide translation in English and Russian. And I don't know if you know this about the Russian community in Israel, but they offered so much in the arts because Russian culture is so artful and the patrons of the arts are so wholehearted. Anyway, tumbalala, tumbalala, tumbalalaika, tumbalala, tumbalala, tumbalala. Do you know what it means?
Well, in Russian, balalaika is an instrument, so I figured it was like related to the instrument. It's like a guitar almost. Yeah. But is there something else? Does tum have a meaning that balalaika does not?
No, but the poem that's told is about a guy who's trying to get with a girl, and he comes up to her and he's like, how do I come on to her without being dissed, essentially? And he goes, well, I'll offer her this riddle. He gives her a riddle asking, like, what can burn without being consumed? What can cry without tears? And it's very romantic. And she's like, oh, you silly boy. It's this and it's that and it's go away. Strum.
Was she right?
Yeah. Well, it's poetry. So he says, Mädel, Mädel, ich will bei dir fragen, wo's can wachsen ohne Regen, what can grow without rain, wo's can brennen in nicht auf Herden, what can burn without being consumed, wo's can bang, can weinen und reden, what can yearn and cry without tears. And she says, Narische Bucher, wo's darfst dir fragen? You silly boy, why would you even ask? A Stein can wachsen ohne Regen. A stone can grow without rain. Liebe can brennen in nicht auf Herden. Love can burn without being consumed. A heart can bang, can vein in onteren. A heart can yearn, cry without tears. Tumbalalaika. Yeah. So was she right? Sure. I don't know how a stone can grow exactly, but it's lasted all these years. It's a classic.
It's an abstract idea, okay?
Yeah. She's just super deep.
Yep, exactly. Now, there's something also I wanted to ask you about regarding like Yiddish music and Yiddish theater. It had an influence on the culture we have around Off Broadway, Broadway, and Hollywood. What is that influence? Can you talk about it and educate the listenership a little bit?
Sure. For the record, Jews don't control the media, but they did create Hollywood. When Jewish people started immigrating to the United States, of course, en masse, in the 1900s, they were not allowed to hold certain positions in society because of anti-Semitism or anti-Jewish hate or racism, prejudice. So they took these jobs in the shmata business, like making clothing. And being that the Jewish people are people of the book, natural storytellers, we are ritualistic people. We tell the same stories every single week for thousands of years all over the world, synchronized. How crazy is that? And we tell the same prayers word for word all over the world using the same choreography with the same props. This was a sort of cultural legacy that we have by way of our religion. But there were some Jewish people who had broken off from the religion, but this storytelling tradition stuck with them. And they had access to costumes because they were working as tailors and as factory workers in the garment industry. And so they started the Yiddish theater. And back then, we have this idea that celebrities are like fancy people, but entertainment workers were low-class people, which meant that the white American wouldn't have any interest in engaging in that field. But there's always been a need for entertainers and for entertainment. So the Yiddish theater morphed into what we understand Off Broadway and Broadway to be, certainly musical theater. And then once technology had evolved, many of those theater professionals and costume garment district professionals went out west, Jews, and created what we understand Hollywood to be today. And we used our natural and well-practiced storytelling skills to entertain, enlighten, educate the masses. All the while, there was a sense that these Jewish writers and producers were sort of infusing their stories with a sentiment that Jews are just like you, just like me, like we all have the same values of family, and had sort of promoted this idea that like Jews are white just like everybody else, like we're just like you, which worked, which helped us assimilate for 100+ years.
But the tables are turning, okay?
But the tables are turning, yeah. That's the short answer to a long story, but it happened with music as well. So my mentor, Zalman Mlotek, taught me this song about a tailor, actually, and it's a children's song. It goes, Ota zoi neinta Schneider, Ota zoi neinter doch, Ota zoi neinta Schneider, Ota zoi neinter doch, neint und neinta ganze Woch, verdient Gilden mit a Loch. And in the hands of Cab Calloway, it goes, my mama used to sing to me a plaintive little melody, and where that melody came from, I swear I'll never know. But now that I'm a citizen, the tune comes back to me again. And as I tell this story, well, just listen how it goes. Ot Azay, says the tailor, as he fashions pretty clothes. Ot Azay, says the tailor, as he sews and sews and sews. He says busy as can be, making lovely finery. Things my baby loves to wear when I take her to the fair. And it goes on. But he grew up in the tenements of Baltimore with Jewish immigrants, and he heard that song. There are so many of those stories within the klezmer, jazz, Broadway world, because many of the band leaders were Jewish and were the first to integrate all races, all backgrounds together in one band. I just find so much, I feel so proud. I just feel so proud of us. We've offered so much to this world and to this country.
I didn't even think about the fact that it's in our DNA by the nature of how we pass on our culture and traditions and religions, that we repeat everything over and over again, that we tell the same stories over and over again. So my mind is blown. And when you were talking about this, I immediately thought of Andrew Lloyd Webber and Jesus Christ Superstar. And then I started thinking, music, it knows no boundaries, because where one genre ends and the other one begins, it's not so clear cut. And you could hear motifs or patterns of notes that are in both genres, because jazz and klezmer, it's a very fine gray area where one ends, the other begins. There's inspiration from both. Yeah.
The interesting thing about klezmer music, which is a reflection of Jewish culture, is that it's porous and welcoming of its host country, sound, flavor, etc. So in Romanian klezmer, you'll see and hear a lot of Roma influences, gypsy sounds. In klezmer of the Lower East Side, there's a lot of jazz influence and Broadway influence both ways. It's danced back and forth together. It always has a cantorial or Eastern European base. There is always the foundation, the Jewish foundation, the Jewish language, the kvetch of the fiddle or the clarinet, but really inspired by and welcoming to and delighted by other genres like tango. In World War II, Jewish people who were in the Holocaust would perform, write, and entertain each other on stage and in private moments with new music. It is so intrinsic to the Jewish soul to sing, partially, like you say, because we repeat after the chazan, the cantor. And so we remember through song. We have cultural and collective memory on a tune, on a note. And even last night when I was mourning, grieving, October 7th with my father, I heard his pain and I soothed him with music, which allowed him to cry, which is important. It is so profoundly Jewish. And in the Holocaust, there was a tango influence in a lot of the songs that were written because it was popular at that time. It's very Jewish of us to enjoy the world and also have the foundation of who we are, which is Ivri, which is ever so slightly outside or crossed over from the other. It's like how bagels are Jewish and they're everybody's, or how latkes are street food in Poland, but we think of it as Jewish food. We have this relationship with the entire world, which was a punishment on some level to be in exile, but it was also a delight.
I was thinking about this because the Jewish people have been displaced for so many years. Just like you said, a lot of the cultural norms, the cuisine, everything is influenced by the host country. But then I started thinking that even Israel is influenced by the quote unquote host country because it's so Middle Eastern there. Like Israelis are more Arab than they are Eastern European, and their culture and mentality and cuisine in Israeli food is also similar to what you find in Middle Eastern countries. So everything is kind of mixed and shared with someone else.
I agree. It is so Middle Eastern in Israel. And I mean, the Middle Eastern food is just really delicious. Just good. There are a lot of Ashkenazis and they have a tremendous influence on Israeli culture. But when it comes to food, the Mizrahi food is, I'm sorry, but it's just better. Just tastes better.
Because it has spices.
I don't
To begin, it has some kind of spice.
Yeah, but who doesn't like kugel? Kugel's great.
Tis true. And a little bit more on Klezmer. You have a film coming out called Klezmerette. What is the main message of the film?
I'm in the process of filming Klezmerette, and it's a multimedia experience where we have an album and the making of the album of a klezmer artist. The big question of the film is why? Why do we hold on to these traditions, these stories, these songs? What's the point? And I always go back to one of the most famous Yiddish songs, which is Oif Pripyatchik. And just like you said, we repeat. And in the song, it takes place by a fire, and the rabbi is teaching the children the alphabet. And he says, Zetche kinderlach, gedenksche tayere, was ihr lernto. Say it, children, and remember what you learn here. Zogje noch amol und take noch amol. Say it again and again. So that repetition comes back to us. But the lyric that really sticks with me is, As ihr vet kinderlach älter werden, when you children get older, vet ihr allein versteh, you will understand. Wie viel in die Häusjes liegen Tränen, how these letters hold so many tears, und wie viel Gewein, and how full they are. And I find that for myself to be true, that the older I get, the more I have reverence for our literary culture, our holy language. In fact, our holy languages, many of them are becoming extinct. And we are such a prolific people, such a storytelling people, that we have written down our experience one generation after another. And if I have access to what these songs mean and how it's impacted not just the Jewish people, but society at large, I feel I have to tell you, because for a long time, I spent years fighting anti-Semitism on social media, which I think is an absolutely important pursuit. But what I can offer more than that as an artist is Jewish pride in who we are and what we stand for, what we've experienced, what we've endured, what it means to be a Jew, which I'm not convinced we have a full understanding of if we don't have access to a whole canon of literature, songs, poems, novels. Hopefully this film will open up the curiosity to learn a little bit more about those contributions and about this language and this music.
Coming to theaters near you. When's it coming out?
Who knows? It'll take some time for us to film this year, and really what we need is support from the community.
I thought you were going to be like, money. What we need is money.
That's really what we need. And it's hard. I was like, support from the community, and Margarita, being the business boss babe that you are, you're saying money. Yes, I do. That's what we need. It's a hard time now because I think fundraising for anything outside of Israel.
Where are the Russian Jews right now? The patrons of the arts. This is when we need them.
Maybe they're tuning in, and maybe they'll check out my Instagram, and I'll send them a link to our Kickstarter. I would really appreciate that. I think it's important for people to, of course, support Israel as I do. We can get into that at a later date or later in this conversation. I also think there is a diaspora community who is longing to understand ourselves. And art, music, culture helps, and it heals.
I completely agree. And it is one of the things that gives me solace every time I'm down about this conflict, is specifically art, musicals, shows, performance, a language that's not just words, where like multiple senses are active in order to understand something, in order to consume something.
In Hasidic culture, they say a nigun, or a wordless melody, is that primordial sound. Like da 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 da. It's universal. It transcends language. And actually, it transcends our thinking mind into our feeling being, which when we are under attack, which is in fact happening in real time, it's not in our heads, it's a real thing going on, it can be hard to come back to our feeling place. And it's also vital for our spiritual well-being, our physical well-being, our, cultural connections to each other and our ancestors, to come back and feel safe in our bodies.
Hearing you speak just now, it made me curious. You alluded to this earlier, but I want to dig in a little bit deeper. You had said I used to do more of the social media activism work, and I would like to argue that you still do a lot of that work. So in the last year, can you talk about how that work has impacted you?
I actually started advocating for the Jewish community in 2021, where I was blown away by friends, colleagues, people I knew well were posting blood libel, like old Jewish hate just resurfaced on my iPhone. And I was very overwhelmed by it. And I saw that there were activists like Chen Mazig and Blake Flayton and Eve Barlow and Matthew Nuriel, who at the time was called the Empress Mizrahi. And I really wanted to do what they were doing. And I did. I spent hours a day educating and posting and commenting and replying, and for years. And then I went to Tel Aviv with the Tel Aviv Institute and became very close with Chen, started working with them. And I find so much purpose in trying to make a dent online, because there are enormous accounts spreading horrific lies. Like, when I say horrific, I don't want to get too dark, but really bad, about the Jewish people in Israel. And so I am a progressive, liberal, educated Jewish woman. I know a lot about Israel, about Torah, about Jewish people, about the Sephardic culture, about the Ashkenazi culture. I live at the intersection of a lot of discourse, and I tried my best. This year was really like the straw that broke the camel's back for me, in a way, where I thought, oh my gosh, I have really sacrificed my health, my financial stability, my emotional well-being for this work. I took a step back, even though I still am vocal on social media. I took a step back to support the community in a different way behind the scenes, because I was getting I get a tremendous amount of hate, unfortunately, not just from the anti-Semites. And that is scary. Really, those anti-Semites are like really scary. But even within the Jewish community, I'm not sure that people really know how hard it is to put yourself out there like that. And I do wish that if anyone is listening to this podcast who is Jewish and appreciates the influencers who put their parnasseh, or their parnassah, their livelihood, their well-being on the line to help in some way, I wish that people would be kinder within the Jewish community. And I understand that there are really traumatizing factors that mean that people are reactive and scared and have a hard time grappling with nuance. But at some point I had to recognize that, like, you can't shut me up. Like, I'm going to be on, if I'm going to be on Instagram and I have something to say about how much I love being a Jew or anything else, I'll say it. But I'm an artist. That's what I do. That's what I was put on earth to create, is art, more than activism. And I think I can make a bigger impact with my sweet, sensitive Jewish soul this way.
I respect that so much, because everyone has their purpose in this world. And sometimes when you're gifted or talented in many things, you want to do everything. And it's very powerful and wise to look at what you have in front of you and be like, I could do this, but I don't think I want to. I don't think it's what's best for me nor others.
I don't think I can, is the truth. I don't think I can. I don't know if people understand activism is not a paid job. Some activists, this is their full-time job, but for most Jewish activists, this is a calling and a labor of love I guess my biggest plug would be if you could give love back to those creators. They're small business owners, just like the coffee guy who got, boycotted, whether they're like fashion influencers or wellness or cookbook authors. If they're going out on a limb, actors like myself, they're going out on a limb, missing out on job opportunities because they're too quote unquote political or because they're even Jewish. I just ask the community to please support those people.
I always tell my friends who either make stuff or whatever, if they offer to give me something for free, I'm like, no, give me the link, I'll buy it. I'm not the person that should be taking this for free. Somebody else can get it for free who doesn't know about you, who doesn't yet support you, and it has an opportunity to support you. You can send me the link to the tickets, to the books, to the whatever. And that's the way I think we should do it with friends, especially those who work in an industry that's not well paid. Now, there's another part of this that you do, which is podcasting, which I can say is often a free labor of love, as you call it. What's up with Mom Curious, and how did you decide to have this podcast?
I process the world around me through storytelling, and I entered motherhood and I learned a lot about myself and about culture at large, about the many ways there are to being a mother, to getting to motherhood, or actually choosing not to be a mother at all. And I just didn't see that reflected in the discourse and in media. I just wanted to be a vessel for that conversation. And so I have these conversations with women about fertility, about the different ways of mothering and of being a woman in this world. It's been about 3 years. My show is produced by Hoff Studios, and the executive producer is Laura Lucetti, who is an absolute rock star. And we're still really enjoying getting to sit down with mothers of all stripes. I mean, we talk about Black maternal health, and we talk about chosen single motherhood, egg freezing and the process therein, surrogacy, adoption. Fostering is a really closed door conversation. He's the only man that has ever graced the show is a foster dad. It was a really wildly interesting conversation. Yeah, and there's a lot more. I find women to be fascinating, and the creators of life, like, I want to celebrate that. So yeah, that's what Mom Curious is about. And I'm still really inspired by it. So I'll keep going.
The gift of podcasting is you as the host end up learning a lot more than you think, which I have to say is the best part of doing this thing for me personally. And I'm sure that as a mom, you've learned a tremendous amount from your guests as well. Now, how can people find you on social media and learn more about all of these different projects?
You can follow me at Daniella Rabbani and at Mom Curious on Instagram. By the time this show is out, I will have launched my fundraiser for Klezmerette, and I hope you'll go ahead and check out a little bit about the project and invest a little bit in Jewish arts.
I actually have the perfect Russian-speaking Jewish organization to send this link to, because all Russian-speaking Jews who love the arts, they love the humanities, the fancy schmancy.
Margarita, it really is true, though.
No, 100%. My family's the same way. They're like, did you go to the ballet?
It's amazing.
I went to the opera like 2 weeks ago, unironically, because that's what I like to do in my spare time. So it's true. It is not a generalization by any stretch of the imagination.
It's so beautiful.
We own it loud and proud.
Like, there are two sides to like the same coin of art. There's the artist, and equally, if not more importantly, there's the patron of the arts. You are really important in this process. The audience is like the muse, is the whole thing. So thanks, Russian Jews. Thanks, Russians in general. We love you.
This has been a real treat. I learned so much about you, even though I'd like to say I know you at least a little bit from having followed you on social media for a year now, almost, and met you a couple of times. I have one more question for you. It's one that I ask every single guest. Who would you like to nominate for People Jew Wanna Know podcast?
Yeah, I want to nominate my friend, Rabbi Rebecca Karen Jablonski. I think you met her at that Shabbat I hosted. She's really cool. She has a new book out. It's called Confessions of a Female Rabbi, and I think she'd be a great guest.
Thank you so much for doing this, Daniella. This has been a true privilege.
Thank you so much for the work you're doing. I'm so grateful.
If you've enjoyed this podcast, please go ahead and rate us 5 stars. Be the first to hear our episodes by subscribing to People Jew Want to Know wherever you get your podcasts. And for exclusive content, follow us on Instagram at People Jew Want to Know.